It is, in fact, because it is about a family that lives in a gated community beyond the gates. According to NBC News, the soap opera is making history. What is so historic?
I think it's it's like something, you know, in the age of DEI backlash, they are managing to put a soap opera on the air that has a mostly black cast.
The NBC headline is, Beyond the Gates makes TV history on CBS as the first all-black daytime soap.
Because, you know, sometimes your lips are dry, Vaseline, they'd be a good partner.
This is definitely not the answer. I would love it, though, if Malia Obama, a little producer, got her hands on a soap opera. I think that'd be fun. Obamas are like post-politics trying to get into, you know, film and TV production.
It is not one of the Obamas. It is the NAACP.
Oh, whoa.
Yes, the civil rights organization partnered with CBS at the time of the Black Lives Matter movement to make new TV shows.
Oh.
Finally, panel, the New York Times says that soap opera ratings began to really decline after one certain historic event. What historic event sent the soap ratings plummeting?
I was going to say, to quote David Cross's Tobias on Arrested Development, I don't want to blame it all on 9/11, but it sure didn't help.
Yeah.
Close. It was something that happened that made everyone stop watching the soaps because they wanted to watch this instead.
OJ.
You are all correct. It was, in fact, the O.J. Simpson trial. That's right, O.J. Simpson, also guilty of killing the soaps. I'm Gavin Crawford. This is Because News with Matea Roach, Jan Caruana, and Jonas Charlie. Hey, while you're buying Canadian at the grocery store, don't forget to follow Canadian too. Follow us wherever you get your podcasts.
Because News, Canada's news quiz.
It is time now, panel, for my favorite round, the one I know the most about. That's right, get ready for sports news.
Yeah.
Canada's new WNBA team has yet to take the court, but this week it signed its first major star. For a point, who inked a deal with the Toronto Tempo this week?
I'll give you a clue, Gavin. She's 5'2" and hates running. The little balla from Little Malta, Jan Caruana!
I wish, but no.
Toronto sports teams usually have a little bit of money going on, so did they manage to sign Caitlin Clark?
I feel like they didn't sign a player yet. I don't think they've drafted anybody. Is Serena Williams signed a deal to like be a co-owner of the team?
You are correct for the point.
Oh.
But I'm giving a Jonas a half point for some basketball knowledge.
Thank you.
That's the gay agenda. The CBC headline reads, tennis legend Serena Williams joins WNBA expansion team Toronto Tempo. In her social media announcement, Williams can be seen bouncing a tennis ball that then morphs into a basketball. What caption appears with that video?
I still don't forgive Drake.
Yeah. Is it Not Like Us under there?
She's ready to slam some big balls now.
The caption that appeared under the video of the tennis ball turning into a basketball was "New court, new game."
Oh, yeah.
Canadian sports were front and center this past weekend after Mike Myers made a gesture that spawned a Canadian hashtag. What was the Canada-wide hashtag?
Swing.
Jonas?
Donkey. I guess.
This is really where you see the generational divide.
I was gonna say.
I would like my answer stricken from the record.
It was not hashtag donkey, but I really wish it was. He made a gesture at the end of SNL that had everyone tweeting what?
Elbows up.
What does elbows up mean?
He's going to elbow you. I don't know. It's time to get aggressive. It's time to slam people against the boards.
Yes, in a manner of speaking, correct.
Okay.
It's when the referees aren't making calls, so you have to make your own justice. It basically is, hockey terminology for get ready for a fight. CBC ran the headline, "Elbows Up rallying cry evokes memories of Mr. Hockey." Panel, you're all younger than me. Do you know who Mr. Hockey is?
Of course, the man who invented hockey.
He lives famously in Millionaire's Row next to Mr. Monopoly and Mr. Clean. Matea, who is Mr. Hockey?
They named a bridge after him. That's Gordie Howe.
You are correct for the point.
Yeah.
Oh, this is the Jeopardy shining through. Gordie Howe, the famous hockey player, was known as Mr. Elbows before he took on the iconic nickname of Mr. Hockey.
There was not a lot of creativity going on. Just throw a Mr. in front of it.
Oh, here comes Mr. Skates. Panel, somehow we have reached the end of another exciting Because News. This week's champion is Matea Roach. Congratulations, Matea. You have the honor of reading our credits. I'm Gavin Crawford. Remember, Canada, on Sunday there will be a new Liberal leader, so you have until then to remove your F. Trudeau bumper stickers, because after that, they'll mean something else. We'll see you next week. Why? Because News! Give it up for Jan Caruana, Jonas Charlie, and Matea Roach.
Hey, Canada. This is Matea Roach, winner of Because News. Congratulations to my beautiful runners-up, Jonas Charlie and Jan Caruana. Because News is written and produced by Elizabeth Bowie, Vanessa Greco, Gavin Crawford, and Jess Klimowski. This week they had help from Alice Moran, Jana O'Connor, John Blair, and Sam Franks. Rounding out the team, Aaron Conway, Diana Markulin, Bronwyn Page, Chris Lyons, and last but not least, recording engineer Paul Hodge.
You're listening to CBC Radio 1. CBC, always here for Canada. Campaign songs. Sometimes the songs are written expressly for the political party or candidate.
I for president, I for president.
Sometimes politicians co-opt pop songs. And sometimes the artists have a big problem with that. Orchestrating elections, political campaign songs on Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly. Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland. And on demand on CBC Listen.
We carry a world of information in our pockets because we want to know. It's news you can trust, delivered when you want and where you want on Canada's News app. Now with CBC Radio 1.
Good afternoon. I'm Julie Buckingham. At 12 o'clock, it is mostly cloudy and -4 in downtown Winnipeg. Up to 2 centimeters of snow this afternoon, temperature falling to -8 degrees. Winnipeg police making an arrest in a homicide dating back to September of 2021. The body of 44-year-old Faye Sanderson was found in a home at 510 Yonge Street. The initial investigation found the blaze had been deliberately set. Sanderson was a member of the Moshakahikan Cree Nation near Moose Lake in northern Manitoba. Officials say she had been living in the city when she died. Over the years, officers identified a suspect, and last week, 35-year-old Kendra Leanne Sinclair was arrested in the Edmonton Institution for Women. She's been charged with second-degree murder. Investigators say the victim and suspect were known to each other. It is day one for Mark Carney as the new leader of the Liberal Party, and already the opposition are sharpening their knives for an election.
If Mr. Carney was to start an election in the coming minute, we're ready. Let's go.
That's Bloc Québécois leader Yves-François Blanchet. He insists he is ready to take Carney on in Quebec. And at a news conference in Ottawa, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre launched a full-throttled attack on Carney.
The Liberal establishment has installed Justin Trudeau's economic advisor as the next Liberal leader to trick Canadians into giving Liberals a 4th term in power. But he's just like Justin.
Carney is the former governor of the Bank of Canada and Bank of England. He replaced Trudeau after an overwhelming endorsement by Liberal Party members yesterday. He is expected to be sworn in as Prime Minister in the coming days. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister designate is busy putting together his team. Sources tell CBC News Mark Carney has picked Marco Mendicino as his chief of staff. We don't know, however, if the appointment is permanent. Mendicino is a Toronto MP who held immigration and public safety portfolios in the Trudeau government. Effective today, Ontario is slapping a 25% surcharge on all electricity exports to the U.S. It is part of Premier Doug Ford's initial suite of retaliatory measures against American tariffs on Canada.
I will not hesitate to increase this charge. If necessary, if the United States escalates, I will not hesitate to shut the electricity off completely.
Ontario provides power to some 1.5 million customers in Minnesota, New York, and Michigan. Vladimir Zelensky is meeting with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia ahead of talks between the U.S. and Ukraine. Delegations from both countries will sit down in Jeddah tomorrow. The talks come as Kyiv faces pressure from American officials and is being squeezed by Russian troops on the battlefield. Briar Stewart has the story.
Russia claims that thousands of Ukrainian troops have been nearly encircled in Russia's Kursk region. Ukraine's military made a surprise incursion into the area in August, and since then Russia has been trying to recapture several hundred square kilometers. A video released by Ukraine's air assault forces shows what is purported to be Russian troops who launched a surprise attack by creeping several kilometers through a gas pipeline. Ukraine's top military commander visited the region, saying the situation in Kursk is under control and insists that troops aren't on the verge of being encircled. While its military is facing pressure, Kyiv is also now being squeezed by recent U.S. decisions after Washington halted the transfer of military aid and curbed the sharing of intelligence. Briar Stewart, CBC News, London.
King Charles is calling for unity in his Commonwealth Day message. The King and several members of the royal family attended a service today at London's Westminster Abbey. Kate, Princess of Wales, made her first appearance at the Commonwealth Day ceremony for 2 years after battling cancer. Anna Cunningham reports.
King Charles's Commonwealth Day speech calls on nations to come together in the spirit of support and friendship, rather than focusing on differences in uncertain times. A source close to the King telling the Times of London that the monarch, who is living with cancer, has Canada particularly on his mind. Edward Young, the former private secretary to the late Queen Elizabeth for 20 years, says for royalty it's often about doing rather than saying.
See for yourself what the reaction to the King's involvement has been over the last few weeks.
Last Monday, the King met Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Mark Carney will be the King's second Canadian Prime Minister of his reign. The King will send his congratulations and confidence in his new Prime Minister designate. Anna Cunningham, CBC News, London.
That is the CBC News from Winnipeg. Your next local CBC News comes your way at 12:30. Turning to your forecast. In Winnipeg, periods of snow this afternoon. Up to 2 centimeters is possible. Temperature falling to -8. Brandon, maybe some freezing rain early this afternoon, then up to 4 centimeters of the white stuff. Gusty wind, temperature falling to -12. Dauphin, snowfall warning in effect. 10 centimeters is possible. Strong wind, temperature falling to -15. Flin Flon, the Paw, sunny -1. Thompson, sun and -18. Churchill, good chance of light snow and -20. You're listening to CBC Radio 1.
Good afternoon, Manitoba. You are listening to Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, 97.9 FM in Brandon, on the CBC Listen app and streaming on CBC Manitoba's YouTube channel. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse. Here's what's coming up on the show today. During our call-in, another case of measles has been confirmed in Manitoba. Canada's top doctor is warning with people traveling during spring break The number of cases across the country could rise. We're going to take your calls and comments coming up after 12:30. Also, it's like a magazine subscription, but for vegetables. Coming up, we're talking about community-supported agriculture. That's at 12:15. But first up, how is the threat of tariffs impacting the labor market in Manitoba? A labor advocate weighs in. Coming up on the show. Tariff uncertainty is already impacting jobs and markets here in Manitoba. A national labor leader says confusion is already causing layoffs in the manufacturing industry and fewer orders. B. Brusk is president of the Canadian Labour Congress. CBC's Chelsea Kemp first asks how the threat of tariffs is impacting workers.
The chaos that's being caused by the uncertainty on tariffs is already having a significant impact on workers. Workers are worried about what their future is. Workers are worried about their workplaces. They're worried about their communities. We're already hearing about layoffs. We're already hearing about employers not getting the orders into their order books that they would normally have at this time of the year for manufacturing. And that's already having a chilling impact on many workers. I was in Sault Ste. Marie a couple of weeks ago, and workers there are telling me, we're thinking about selling our homes. We're not sure about the uncertainty, and we want to make sure that we can still get a good price for our home. So people are making decisions based on the chaos, and we need to have some assurances from government to deal with these issues.
Well, and I'm based out of Brandon, Manitoba. We're a big manufacturing town. What are you hearing about Manitoba, about the prairies? Is there anything insulating people when it comes to tariff impacts, or is there things that are making it worse?
There's nothing that's specifically insulating people. We need an all hands on deck approach, especially coming from a place like Manitoba, my home province as well, knowing how important the pork industry is to Brandon and to Neepawa and southwestern Manitoba in particular. We know that pork products cross the border multiple times before they hit our shelves at the local grocery store. And so, having worker supports in place is critically important. And that means that when workers apply for employment insurance, they need to be able to qualify. Currently, only 2 in 5 workers qualify when they actually apply. We need to find new ways to diversify our markets and to find new homes or new places to actually export our product to. That means we need to see some investments in rail, in our roads, in ports, and those kinds of things. And workers, most importantly, need to have the supports that they need, and that means a robust social safety net, which means a robust employment insurance system.
And I know there's a big push right now to buy Canadian. So the manufacturers I've spoken to, some of the contractors are saying clients are reaching out, saying, is your product Canadian? Is it sourced Canadian? Do you see that helping workers because there's that upswell of support for fellow Canadians?
We should always be buying Canadian. We should always be buying local whenever possible, right? And we should always be supporting union workers because those are good paying jobs that generally have decent wages, benefits, and a pathway to retirement. And every worker should have that in Canada, let's be honest. And so buying Canadian is critically important. Making sure that you're checking what's in your basket is critically important because right now, as Canadians, we need to support one another first and foremost.
Do you see that happening? Do you see that continuing to happen? Because speaking personally, I don't know if I've ever seen quite this much support for Buy Canadian.
It's very true. I've never seen as much support for Buy Canadian as I've seen right now. I really hope that this is the start of something that's going to last, that it's not just a blip while we're feeling the pressure from the US, but that we start recognizing the value that we ourselves bring to our workplaces and our communities by the labor that we put into producing things, right? Whether it's goods or services or manufacturing, whatever the case might be, while it's buses that are made in Winnipeg or pork cutlets that you get from the Brandon Maple Leaf plant.
Well, and when I know it's a time of great uncertainty, what would provide the most support, the most peace of mind for workers right now, especially in manufacturing?
Workers are really nervous and they're very worried because every tweet from the White House means a different direction. So regardless of what industry they're in, there's a huge amount of anxiety right now. And so what workers want to see is that our federal government has not just a vision, but they have a plan. And that plan needs to include supports so that workers can stay connected to their communities, connected to their workplaces, and that they can continue to pay the rent.
And just from your point of view, are there any industries you see within the prairie region getting especially impacted right now?
I don't know that there's one or another that's more important than others, because I hear from union leaders from all different kinds of industry, whether they're in steel and aluminum in Ontario, whether they're in the pork production industry in Manitoba, whether they're in oil and gas in Alberta. Everybody is nervous and everybody is worried about what the next announcement is going to be. I think everybody feels like we're in the same situation where the uncertainty is significant and the assurances are not nearly enough.
Have you ever navigated this much uncertainty as a Congress?
I think we can say that during COVID, there would have been a similar kind of uncertainty, with the exception that during the COVID situation, we all felt that there was going to be an end to that uncertainty, in the sense of there would be a vaccine and hopefully life would go back to normal. There was a little bit of the entire world is feeling it with us right now. In this particular case, we've got almost 4 more years of a Trump government. Who knows what's coming after that? I think we need to pivot as Canadians. We need to diversify our markets, and we need to find a new way of doing things. And that means we have to be supporting one another right now. We are an incredibly integrated economy with the United States economy. And I think every business leader and every union leader in Canada understands that we need to find different ways of doing things, and that we can no longer rely on the United States as our largest trading partner in the same way that we have before.
As we make those adaptations, are you expecting to see layoffs?
100%, we're already seeing those layoffs. It's not just that we're expecting them, we know they're already taking place in different parts of the country. And so we need to see strong supports for workers, and we need our government to step up and to provide those supports.
That is Canadian Labour Congress President Bea Brusk speaking with the CBC's Chelsea Kemp.
5 perceptive panelists, 5 blockbuster books, 4 days of smart and sassy deliberation and debate, but there can only be one winner. The best book to change the narrative. Hi, I'm Ali Hassan, and I'm hosting Canada's favorite book battle, Canada Reads 2025. One book to change the narrative.
Canada Reads starts Monday, March 17th. For more, go to cbcbooks.ca.
It is 12:13, and you're listening to Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, on the CBC Listen app, and streaming on CBC Manitoba's YouTube channel. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse. Still ahead here, if you're looking for ways to buy groceries while supporting local, you want to stay tuned for our next segment. We'll be having a conversation about a way you can support your local farmer. Stay tuned for that. Let's talk about the forecast today. So we have some weather warnings that are in place for parts of western Manitoba and the Interlake. We have a strong Alberta clipper that is moving through the central part of the province. 5 to 10 centimeters expected from Dauphin through Gimli into Pinawa and into northwestern Ontario by day's end. Today here in Winnipeg, we are expecting snow, about 2 centimeters, periods of snow. Temperature falling to -8, north wind gusting to 40. Tonight, snow once again, but clearing out overnight, a low of -17. Tomorrow, mix of sun and cloud and a high of -5. Wednesday, cloudy with some sunny breaks and a high of 3 degrees. Current conditions right now, Brandon, mostly cloudy and -7. Ice crystals for you in Churchill at -23. We've got -14. Light snow in the Dauphin area. Drifting snow in Flin Flon at -21. Right now in the Paw, sunshine and -20. -21 and sunny in Thompson, and in Winnipeg at the Forks, it is -5 and mostly cloudy. Buy Canadian seems to be the message we're hearing as we navigate the confusing tariff updates coming out of the U.S. And some Manitobans are buying more local products when shopping for their groceries. A food and vegetable subscription program called Community Supported Agriculture is seeing an uptick in demand. Wild Earth Farms, based in Oakbank, offers a CSA program. We've reached co-owner Jeff Veenstra to tell us more. Good afternoon. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Hi, Marjorie. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Not too bad.
First off, tell us what a CSA is, or Community Supported Agriculture, for people who are not familiar with it.
Yeah, it's we do a vegetable subscription program, so you get a box of vegetables that you sign up for around this time of year, and it starts in June and it goes till October. And you get a box of kind of whatever's in season. So in June, it's kind of light leafy greens, and it progresses throughout the season to the more delicious ones, in my personal opinion, tomatoes and peppers. And then finishes off with the heavy stuff of the squash and the potatoes and the onions and that kind of stuff.
So how does it work? It's a subscription. So do you pay a monthly fee or do you pay as you go? Do you sign up for it ahead of time? How does it work?
Yeah, so the way we have it set up at our farm is you sign up and you pay for it in full before the season starts. I mean, there's some certain situations where we can kind of work out a payment plan, but for the most part, it's paid in full at the beginning of the year. And then you just get a box every week throughout that season.
How much does a CSA membership cost, say compared to getting groceries in a grocery store?
It's fairly equivalent. We try to be very competitive with our pricing with the grocery store, and then we just try and provide the better quality product, the freshness that the individual is getting. So it's very similar, in my opinion.
Tell us what you're seeing in terms of demand. We're hearing so much these days about buying local, supporting Canadian businesses, Canadian farms. What are you seeing in terms of demand?
Yeah, demand has gone up for the CSA boxes. Usually we get a good amount in January and then it kind of peters off February, March, but we haven't seen that. It's been consistently, people are signing up. Names that we've never seen before, others that had signed up with us years ago and are now coming back. And so it's really exciting for us in that sense to see that much support.
You're one of the few businesses that we've spoken to who might be benefiting from the whole tariff situation. Now, how does that make you feel moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, we're benefiting in this specific part of our operation, so that's kind of a relief. It gives us a bit of certainty. We know how much vegetables we're going to be selling this summer, but we also sell to restaurants and to some smaller grocery stores, and we have input costs too. So I mean, there's a whole other half of our operation that there's still a lot of unpredictability and expected increase in costs and that kind of stuff. So. We're really grateful and thankful that we have a CSA that is viewed as a good way of supporting local businesses, and we're happy to have that service.
Jeff, what are some of the benefits of getting your produce this way, like say compared to going into a grocery store or a store and picking up your produce that way?
We've a lot of the comments that people give us, our customers, they say it's like Christmas. It's just it's a surprise. I mean, you can kind of predict what's in season, but they open the box and someone's packed a bunch of vegetables that are fresh and delicious, ready. And we send emails out with recipes. So people know how to use a different product. And so they're exposed to different vegetables that they may have never bought at a grocery store. And then also with people with younger kids, they can see that connection with a farmer. And there's kids that are actually starting to eat more vegetables just because they have Farmer Jeff or Farmer Jana. They provided the vegetables for them. And so there's that connection that they find exciting. So
we know that weather conditions are hit and miss in recent years here in Manitoba. So then what happens if you don't get as big a yield as you might have expected for certain items?
Yeah, that's last year is a good example. We had a awful spring. And so there are certain products that just didn't do well. And we grow a wide variety and quite a bit of diversity. So almost every year we'll have 4 or 5 products that just did not do well. We'll have 20 or 30 that did just fine, and then 5 or 10 that did fantastic. And so if you look at what we provided over the years, there's never been one year that's the same. But we've always strived to get that value in the box every year, no matter what happens.
What have farmers been saying to you? They must actually like that more people are demanding their product delivered to their doors.
Yeah, I mean, there's the other CSA farms. There's some that I've talked to that are also experiencing this, and I'm not sure. There might be a few that aren't, and I hope that it works out for them too. But I mean, it's something that we've been doing for 14 years, and it was continually growing, and then COVID hit, and it jumped, and then it kind of dropped off after that. And so to see it taken up again is exciting, for sure.
How are you planning to leverage the bump in business going forward? Are you planning on expanding your business?
Yeah, we not necessarily expanding. We'll probably have to hire another person to just kind of take on that workload, and then we'll try and kind of grow our business a little bit to be a bit more diverse, a bit more solid going forward. So that's kind of the plan. It's kind of come up on us in the last 2 months. We're still trying to figure out if this is something that's going to carry on for until the season starts, or if this is just a 2-month thing, or what it is. So it's hard to know exactly what we're going to do here.
Well, Jeff, I really do appreciate you joining us today here on the show. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Jeff Veenstra is co-owner of Wild Earth Farms. $12.22 now. Your banking password is supposed to be a secret code. You keep it to yourself for a good reason. It's the gateway to your financial life. You even sign a contract saying you understand bad things can happen if you share it. So then why do so many Canadians know each other's passwords? CBC's Blair Sanderson has the answer.
I just started this. It's a scrappy quilt, basically.
About once a week, Priscilla Buchanan drops into this sewing club just outside of Halifax. She's comfortable here, behind a sewing machine, but now she's trying her hand at another technology, online banking.
No, well, my husband started doing it, and then he passed away, so I continued, and it's very challenging sometimes.
Priscilla says she's pretty good at paying her bills and checking her balance, but once in a while she needs help. So she shares the password to her online bank accounts with her son.
Passwords are one of the most important things that you do share with somebody you can trust.
According to an RBC survey from 2020, more than half of Canadians share their bank card PINs or online passwords.
Which is a really big amount of folks out there who are sharing this extremely sensitive information that is essentially the keys to your financial accounts.
Jeff Morton is in charge of fraud strategy at RBC. He says it's often people like Priscilla, seniors who need help with their online accounts. But not always.
No, we certainly see it affecting all demographics, in younger generations sharing with parents or with friends. So it's certainly not something that targets only the senior citizens.
But Jeff says it's a bad idea no matter who you are. Sharing passwords with people who are not named on your account violates your service agreement. If money goes missing, the bank won't help you. And in the case of fraud,
it could mean that you are now liable for those fraud transactions and are no longer guaranteed the reimbursement for that from the bank.
The bank is not going to do anything to help you. They're not going
Celine Latulip teaches computer science at the University of Manitoba. She knows it's risky to share passwords, but...
Sure, I have had somebody share a bank password with me. Yes, and a parent.
And are you nervous admitting that because, you're not supposed to do that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not something that really should have to happen.
But Celine says there aren't a lot of good options. You can sign up for a joint account, but she says that's really only suitable for people in committed relationships who share their financial assets. And if you don't fall into that category, things can get dicey.
Joint accounts also mean that the person who becomes joint also takes on any debts. So if the older adult suddenly goes into negative balance, well, that affects the credit rating of the person who's become a joint account holder, right? So there's responsibilities that come with that may not be desired.
Celine says a better idea would be to do what they've done in the UK and India. Offer what's known as proxy accounts. Seniors who need a little help with their online banking can give someone limited access to their accounts using a separate password. So a caregiver could be allowed to pay bills, but have limits on how much they withdraw.
And so, proxy accounts would allow the older adult to decide what is it that I want to be able to get help with, and how much access do I want to give this person? And that then really sets a limit on how much damage could be done if the person who's given access decides to act nefariously.
As for Priscilla Buchanan, she says she's not too concerned about sharing her passwords. She trusts her son.
I still call him when I need assistance.
And she's getting better at online banking. Her latest step, switching to automated bill payments.
Because sometimes they forget to pay them.
For CBC Radio, I'm Blair Sanderson.
For more stories about how money shapes our lives in ways big and small, check out the Cost of Living podcast. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts, or catch the show here on CBC Radio 1 at noon on Sundays and Tuesday mornings at 11:30. We have a snowfall warning in effect for parts of central Manitoba, 5 to 10 centimeters expected. Dauphin through Gimli into Pinawa and northwestern Ontario by day's end. Right now in Lynn Lake, light snow and -23. Gimli, you're currently at -8. The lineup for the 50th anniversary edition of the Winnipeg Folk Festival has been announced, and one of the headlining acts is iconic folk duo Gillian Welsh and David Rollins. The pair have received several Grammy nominations over the years, including for their work on the Coen brothers' film Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Here's a tune you're likely to hear if you check them out at Birds Hill Park this summer. This is Gillian Welsh and David Rollins with Cumberland Batch.
Coming in gap, devil of a gap. Coming in gap, devil of a gap. Kiss me, mama, kiss your boy. Bless me well and lucky. For I won't be back till I return. I'm gone to old Kentucky. Cumberland Gap, devil of a gap. That's what the scouts all tell you. Sure enough to make it tough. If it doesn't kill ya. Kentucky, she's waiting on the other side. Give you the fever, put the daylight in your eyes. Brother John's already gone with the full-blood Cherokee maiden. He made the trip in a blizzard's grip. I'd rather wrestle Satan. Cumberland Gap, devil of a gap. Oh, the snow kept coming. Picked her up on his back. My God, he loved that woman.
My mistake. That is Gillian Welsh and David Rollins with Cumberland Gap. Yes, Cumberland Gap. Still ahead here on Radio Noon in our call-in segment today. There's a new measles case in Winnipeg. Manitoba health officials confirmed that late last week. We're going to be speaking with Jared Bullard from the University of Manitoba, a pediatric infectious disease expert who will take your questions and comments about measles. Stay tuned for that. Coming up next here, your CBC local news.
This is CBC News. Good afternoon. I'm Julie Buckingham in downtown Winnipeg at 12:30. Mostly cloudy and -5. Temperature falling to -8 this afternoon with 2 centimeters of snow expected. A woman suspected in a Winnipeg killing is now charged after a 3-year investigation. In 2021, the body of 44-year-old Faye Sanderson was found inside a burned home at 510 Yonge Street. Officials at that time said the blaze was intentionally set. Police add the suspect, who Sanderson knew, was identified. Kendra Leanne Sinclair, who is 35, was arrested at the Edmonton Institution for Women. She is facing a count of second-degree murder. Mark Carney will soon become the next Prime Minister of Canada. Carney says everything in his life has helped prepare him for this moment after the federal Liberals elected him to lead their party into the next vote. He'll meet with his MPs on Parliament Hill later today, and soon he'll have to name his cabinet. The Bloc leader congratulated Carney and urged an election to be called, which is widely expected to happen quickly after Carney officially becomes the PM. Canada's main stock index opened this week down over 250 points as trade fears continued to linger amid U.S. tariff threats. U.S. President Donald Trump says 25% levies on steel and aluminum imports will take effect in 2 days. However, he's indicated duties on Canadian dairy and lumber now may not arrive until next month. Ontario Premier Doug Ford not waiting, following through on his threat by imposing a surcharge on electricity his province exports to the U.S. This is part of his response to Donald Trump's tariffs on Canadian goods. But as Katie Nicholson reports, it's not clear how effective this latest measure will be.
Until the threat of tariffs is gone for good, Ontario will not relent.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford's latest volley in the trade war, a 25% surcharge on electricity exports that will hit 1.5 million customers in Michigan, New York, and Minnesota.
If the United States escalates, I will not hesitate to shut the electricity off completely.
Pierre-Olivier Pinault is an energy policy specialist at HEC Montreal, a business school. He cautions because Ontario electricity is already so cheap, it's unlikely to have a huge impact.
During off-peak hours, there are so many fluctuations that it's hard to notice a 25% increase from a relatively low-cost source.
But it isn't exactly chump change either. Ontario says the surcharge will generate $300,000 to $400,000 a day, which it intends to use to support those hit hard by U.S. tariffs. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Toronto.
That is the CBC News from Winnipeg. Your next local CBC News is at 1:30.
Thank you very much, Julie.
You bet.
That is Julie Buckingham with a look at your local news here on Radio Noon. And yes, you are listening to Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1. 89.3 FM in Winnipeg on the CBC Listen app and streaming on CBC Manitoba's YouTube channel. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse. Coming up here in our call-in segment, another case of measles has been confirmed in Manitoba. Canada's top doctor is warning with people traveling during spring break, the number of cases across the country could rise. During our call-in segment, Jared Bullard, pediatric infectious disease expert, will join us here on Radio Noon to take your questions and comments about measles. Here's the number to call, 204-780-0893. You can text us at 204-588-7355. Let's take a look now at the forecast, and there's a lot to talk about. CBC weather specialist Riley Lachuk joins me. Okay, I'm going to rewind here a little bit because the groundhog said early spring. That is certainly not the case because not only are you watching what's developing here in central Manitoba, you're also watching something else that could hit us later on this week.
Yes. Well, I'll fast forward a little bit and talk about that. So some of the longer range models are indicating with varying degrees of certainty that we're actually in for another blast of winter coming our way into the weekend. And for some of us, another round of some accumulating snow. A little early to put any amounts on this yet, but I'm just putting that on the radar that something's brewing that could impact your weekend plans right now.
Okay.
And a return to more winter-like temperatures coming with that as well.
All right, Riley. Okay.
We'll keep an eye on that. That's just still several days away yet. We have a lot of time between now and then, a lot of time for things to change. But for now, at least, we are looking at a blast of winter into parts of central Manitoba. Snowfall warnings in place for Dauphin, Roblin, Russell, across the Narrows into the northern Interlake, Pegwis, Arberg, Eriksdale, into Pinawa, Victoria Beach, and into parts of northwestern Ontario. The further north you go into places like Red Lake, we're looking at up to 10 centimeters of snow by the time we get into the evening hours tonight. A lot of that in the Parkland in particular has fallen for you in Dauphin, Roblin, Russell. The snow pretty much done with you already, but still going up Highway number 6 through the Narrows into Arberg. Expect that to continue into the afternoon, and snow moving into the Red River Valley as we get later into the afternoon hours here as well. Along with this, a cold front sweeps through, and that has really, in some cases, quite drastically dragged our temperatures down already. So the center of that low sits right on the Manitoba-Ontario border right now, and the cold front extends all the way back into Saskatchewan right now. And as those that system pushes off into Ontario, that cold front sweeps a little bit further south, we're really seeing our temperatures drop. So Dauphin, for example, at 9:30 this morning was at -10. Now at -14 this hour in Dauphin. Winnipeg, we started at -4. actually started the day at 0. That was our daytime high today at midnight, and we've seen our temperature fall back, and we'll continue to see that drop happening. Right now, temperature sitting around -7 into the Westman region. On the flip side, +7 in Fort Francis with a few showers at the moment right now. So you can see how that cold front is really dragging our temperatures down with it as it passes through into Ontario. That area of low pressure and that front moved down into the southeast. By the time we get to the morning tomorrow, back to a mainly sunny sky in Winnipeg, mixing in some cloud later in the day. Another shot of snow coming into the evening hours for the Red River Valley and much of southern Manitoba. Really talking for places like Winnipeg into Brandon, maybe a couple centimeters, if that, over the next 24, 36 hours, but certainly looking at more like 8 to 10 centimeters for places like Gimli, Arborg, Pinawa, into northwestern Ontario. Temperature in Winnipeg falls to -8 by the time we get to late afternoon, to around -10 into Westman. Looking at a high of -5 for Tuesday, Wednesday +3, Thursday +6, Friday +8 with a chance of showers, and then there's that winter doozy that I'm watching for the weekend. Temperature through the day Saturday falling to -12.
I like how you called a winter doozy.
I think that's what we're probably going to be calling this as we get later in the week. But again, we'll keep an eye on it. Looks like, though, at this point, starting as rain in Winnipeg on Saturday, changing over to some snow through the later part of the day.
All right. Thanks a lot, Riley.
You're welcome.
That's CBC weather specialist Riley Lachuk. Riley will have updates on all the weather warnings coming up this afternoon on Up to Speed, and also tonight on CBC Winnipeg News at 6 on CBC Television and streaming on CBC Gem. It is 12:37 now. Well, health officials in Manitoba confirmed another case of measles in our province. In an update on Friday, officials said the new case isn't connected to previous cases here in Manitoba, but is connected to recent travel to Pakistan. Recently, Canada's top doctor warned Canadians about the surge in measles cases in this country and around the world. Dr. Theresa Tam says it could get worse, with families traveling over the March break. Health officials are again reminding people to check their vaccination status. Now, we're taking your questions here on Radio Noon about measles, and maybe you have some comments. We want to hear from you. The number to call is 204-780-0893, 204-780-0893. You can text us at 204-588-7355, 204-588-7355. Jared Bullard is professor and section head of pediatric infectious disease at the University of Manitoba and joins me now via Zoom. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us on the show today, Jared.
Good afternoon, Marjorie. My pleasure.
Manitoba, as we heard, confirmed another case on Friday. There were 5 previous cases confirmed in February. So I guess the question is, how concerned should we be about measles here in Manitoba?
The way that I think about it is that with measles, it's really just one plane ride away. And I think that when we're looking back in February and then in the case now, that's exactly what happened. We did have the initial cases all had this exposure when they went to a wedding elsewhere in Canada, and they returned with it. And this, as you said, was an international traveler who went to Pakistan, and the same sort of thing. So that's something to always be aware of, that when you travel to different parts of the world, there's a likelihood that you could get measles, including even within Canada and North America.
How dangerous is this then? Because hearing that, people who are on certain flights were being warned that they could have been exposed to this, as you mentioned there, this was the earlier cases. This was sounds like this was, the spread at a wedding event. I mean, how dangerous is this?
Right. So I think danger is a different idea really here. I think the main reason that we're concerned about it is just how infectious measles is. Over the pandemic, people got used to the idea of how many other people can be infected from one person who has a given disease. And when we talk about measles, that is literally the most infectious disease we have. So it can actually infect about 15 to 20 people who have no pre-existing immunity. And so some people, if they're older, have immunity because they were born or they were exposed to it, they got the infection, and then most people now actually have it because of vaccination. I think the main concern is that, like a lot of vaccine preventable diseases, when children get it, they can get really sick. Most of the time, they're going to just have a fever, feel real unwell, and have the very characteristic rash. but it can always progress to other severe complications. So they might have to come into hospital for pneumonia or have a brain inflammation or diarrhea. All of these things are possible. And in particular, we also worry about those whose immune systems aren't very strong for a variety of reasons. So if you think about children or adults whose immune systems are weak because they had a transplant or they're on certain medications or they have cancer, those would be people who may not be able to fight this particular virus off very well. And I think that's why we're primarily concerned about it, because of the ability for it to spread so well and knowing we have a lot of vulnerable people potentially out there.
Jared, we have a call. Lenore is on the line. Hi, Lenore. Hi, Lenore.
Hi, I'm here.
Hi.
My son, he's 63 now, but when he was a year old, he got measles, and he was so sick I thought we were going to lose him. I knew he'd been exposed to them, and I phoned my pediatrician, and he said bring him in, and he gave him a shot of gamma globulin. I don't know what that did, but he did get them. But he was so ill. He was just burning up, and he had been walking, but he didn't walk for another 2 weeks. But he wasn't. I was putting white. All I had was at that time was no Tylenol, just baby aspirin, and just damp face cloths and on him and holding him. He was just. It was so ill, and I just don't. It's so dangerous. I would if you don't have your child vaccinated, and I know I had my measles myself. My mother said as a child, and I was very, very ill. But it was very, very scary, and he was very ill.
Lenore, thank you so much for your comment. Jared, Lenore is sharing a very personal story there about her child. When you hear Lenore's story, I mean, what do you think?
I think that's kind of brings up an important point, is that most of us have no living history of measles. We never really saw it. And so Lenore's talking about her son, who is 63, and he was so sick that she still remembers how sick he was. She also brought up a good point about immune globulin. And so that is something that we can provide to people who have been exposed to measles, particularly if we're worried about them getting really sick from it. But I mean, that's a very similar story to my own. I actually also had measles when I was 2. My mom still talks about how sick I was. And she unfortunately deferred my vaccinations with the mumps, measles, rubella because I had constant allergies from my pet cat that nobody appreciated at the time. So that's actually really important, Lenore, to provide stories like that, because we don't know. We don't see it, right? And it can be very serious, like happened with your son.
We are speaking with Jared Bullard, professor and section head of pediatric infectious disease at the University of Manitoba. We're taking your questions and comments about measles. Manitoba confirming a new case last week of measles in the province. The number to call, 204-780-0893, 204-780-0893, or you can text us at 204-588-7355, 204-588-7355. Jared, how do people check their vaccination status, or how do they go about it if they think they do or they don't have the vaccine?
So I would say that anybody born before 1970 is considered immune via natural infection. They probably would have got the infection, so they would be immune. Those afterwards can always ask their healthcare providers to say if they can look into their vaccination records and ensure that they in fact did get the vaccination. And admittedly, sometimes you don't have access to that information. So on occasion, testing can be warranted, but the vast majority of the time we don't encourage that. Keep in mind that most children are able to get that vaccine when they're 1 year of age, and again with a booster at about 4 to 5 years of age. And it's really quite effective. The first dose is going to be protective in about 95% of cases, and that second dose brings it to 99% or better.
Mm-hmm. And there are some people who decide that they don't want to have the vaccine. I mean, how can they protect themselves?
So this is a tricky one. Like when I was saying that measles is among the most infectious viruses that we know of, if not the most infectious virus, we learned about protection during the pandemic. We know things like staying home when you're sick, avoiding going out in crowds, washing your hands, wearing a mask, all of those things were potentially effective. For measles, the most important thing would be that if you are sick and have measles, staying home and not trying to spread it to other people. It is a bit more challenging to avoid, I think, than other respiratory viruses like the flu or RSV or COVID. And so that does make it a bit harder, right? I'd say one of the key things is the vaccination is completely safe for individuals to get, including children. And so if you're eligible, you should get it, because I think that's going to provide your best chance of avoiding it.
We're speaking with Jared Bullard, professor and section head of pediatric infectious disease at the University of Manitoba. We're talking about measles here today on the show. 204-7800893 is the number to call if you have a question or comment, or you can text us at 204-588-7355. Jared, any idea as to why we're seeing an uptick in measles cases, not only in Canada, but it seems to be around the world?
Mm-hmm. So this is a long-standing issue over the past couple decades. There was a study that came out in the mid-90s, which really put a lot of fear and doubt into people's minds that the mumps, measles, and rubella vaccination was safe, and there were concerns about it. And ultimately, that study was completely debunked, and there's been so much research subsequently that shows that it is completely safe to get that. In fact, it is beneficial. So as a result, there are certain people who still are thinking along those lines that it might not be safe to get. And as a result, the number of individuals we have out there who are vaccinated is getting a little bit lower, right? Ideally, we want to have a good portion, like 90% or better, have the vaccination. And once it gets below that number, that's when we start to see transmission of measles again. And so that's primarily what's happening, is that we have people who are not necessarily getting the vaccination for a variety of reasons, whether it's they don't have access, they don't want to get it. And as a result, this is why it's able to spread more effectively than we saw in the past.
Because there are some people, I've heard some people say that, I thought that this was eradicated. I thought that this was something that was, in the past. And it's just interesting now to see that the numbers are creeping up again. And as we heard there from Dr. Teresa Tam, there is fear that the number of cases could rise again, given that spring break is just around the corner.
Yeah, and that's entirely true. I think that's what we led the segment saying, is that most time it's just one plane ride away. And so if people, in fact, are going away to go on vacation and they're going to certain places in the world, there's a lot more measles. It's important to have that vaccination in place before you go. And it's important, too, I'd say, from the perspective, when I think of little kids and infants in particular from 6 to 12 months, a lot of parents don't think that their child is eligible to get the vaccination with mumps, measles, and rubella and chickenpox. But they can. They absolutely can get that before they travel. They just have to get the standard doses when they're 1 year old and around the age of 5. But yeah, it wasn't eradicated. It was gone for a long time. But that's the thing. Things can come back. The only infectious disease I can think of that truly is eradicated would be smallpox. Definitely don't want to see that. But I think from a measles perspective, yeah, we were close. We were almost successful, right? But unfortunately, that's what happened. That's the nature of infectious diseases.
We are speaking with Jared Bullard, professor and section head of pediatric infectious disease at the University of Manitoba. We're talking about measles here on the show today. Give us a call if you have a question. 204-7800893, 204-7800893. You can also text us at 204-588-7355. 204-588-7355. Jared, are there countries that we're seeing more cases in, or that are hot pockets for this outside of Canada?
Yes, yeah. I'd say when we see measles cases, usually they're coming from Asia, Southeast Asia, countries like the Philippines, sometimes from Africa as well. The one that I think about right now is just south of us, right? There's a large measles outbreak in Texas that's ongoing at the moment. And so that's not to say that it's exclusively exotic or tropical travel. I think you just have to go south of the border, and there's the possibility that you can pick it up there as well. So that's why it's important to make sure that you're as protected as possible. And vaccinations, as I said, are the key way to do that.
Jared, we have Diane on the line. Hi, Diane.
Hello.
Hi, what's your question?
My question is about German measles versus the regular measles. It's my understanding that there's two different viruses, but I'd like to know if that's true. And if you've gotten one, say if you've had German measles, does that mean you will be automatically protected against having the other measles?
That is an excellent question, Diane. So you're right. When we think about German measles or childhood measles or rubeola and measles caused by, they're all different viruses. So the measles virus causes measles. And the rash is somewhat similar in that it is an infectious disease and they have a similar looking presentation. Rubella is the virus that causes German measles. And so when I was talking about the mumps, measles, rubella, chickenpox vaccination, that's another component. And in the same way, once you have that vaccination, you can have protection. Now, keep in mind that if you are to get rubella, and you recover from that and you have your immune system knows what to do with it, it doesn't apply to measles. So you actually still would require vaccination even if you were to get rubella. Now, we don't see a lot of rubella necessarily. And sometimes you'll hear people talk about baby measles as well. And so those are kids that are quite sick and then suddenly they get this head to toe rash and they're dramatically better. And again, that's a different virus. That's the human herpes virus 6. And that, likewise, you won't get it more than once in your life, but it doesn't provide cross protection to rubella or measles. So that's why getting the vaccination is really important.
Thank you so much for your question, Diane. Yeah, Jared, I didn't realize this, or I guess Diane just reminded me that there's different strains. There's different types of measles out there.
Absolutely. What we see sometimes too is that after vaccination, we can see a weakened version of measles. And that makes sense because the vaccine that we're giving is what we call live attenuated. So think of it like a weaker version of the virus that really trains your immune system. But on occasion, you do get this mild rash and a little bit of a fever, and we will see that, as I said, on occasion. But that's why, it's not as big of a deal to see that overall compared to a true case of measles for sure.
Say you believe you're exposed to measles through travel or through gatherings. I mean, how long will it take before you may notice symptoms?
It can be a while. So it can be up to about 21 days before these symptoms will appear. And so that's why it's important to let your healthcare provider know. Now, keep in mind that ideally we can talk to the healthcare provider unless the children are really ill. If they're really ill, bringing them to the emergency department makes sense. So that's like really high fevers. They're not able to eat or drink. They're really weak. They look just really unwell to you. Those would all be indications. Otherwise, it's not a bad idea just to talk to your healthcare providers. If they're concerned, they can also speak to public health or one of our infectious disease colleagues for additional information about what the next steps would be. In particular, if they're quite vulnerable. Again, those people with immune systems that aren't quite as strong might benefit from getting some prophylaxis.
Jared, I want to ask you too, what is it going to take to get the cases under control?
Yeah, I think that we're doing the right things right now. So we have this individual kind of staying to themselves with just their family and limiting the movement. So very similar to what we learned in the pandemic. If you're sick, stay home. Second, if we know that you were exposed, we're basically providing prophylaxis with that immune globulin to help prevent the virus from establishing itself. And then vaccination would be the other aspect of it. And then if we can provide that to enough people kind of in and around the individuals, that'll be helpful too. I think that it's going to take a really concerted effort among public health officials and physicians and healthcare providers in general to encourage vaccination. I think people became a lot more hesitant over the pandemic, and it's really important. And again, without that living memory of seeing measles or a variety of vaccine-preventable diseases and seeing how bad they can be, people don't really think about it. And that's fair, and I understand that. But it's really going to be important to understand that we also need to get that vaccinations, and not just for mumps, measles, rubella, but also for the other things, because we see some pretty horrific things here at the Children's Hospital in children who really didn't need to have certain diseases.
Jared, I want to thank you so much for joining us today here on Radio Noon and taking our calls and comments today from our listeners. Thank you so much.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Jared Bullard is professor and section head of pediatric infectious disease at the University of Manitoba.
Sometimes I feel like I can't feel this isn't real. I should be hurting. I was alone. I was a song, music and bone. God's perfect wording. And could the people understand this? I'm as bruised as a used up canvas. I'm awfully nice, but I'm cold as ice. I've been through hell, but I'll be alright. People here living it up, I think they're blind. I think they're out of their minds. Not one of them has had this. God's not giving me up, no, I'm just fine. It's just a matter of time. Oh, I don't feel my sadness. I know it should be there. Maybe I'm too tired to care, but I'm still fine. I'm on display. I've lost my way. Oh God, I pray, let this pass over. I lost the note. I rocked the boat. I've even choked. I lost my composure. People here living it up, I think they're blind.
That is the Red Clay Strays with I'm Still Fine. It is 12:57 and the host of Up to Speed, the one, the only Faith Fundal joins me now in studio. Hi, Faith.
Hello, Marjorie. Lots to come on the program today. When we think of tariffs, we might not think of one of Canada's biggest artistic exports, music. So we're going to hear from a Canadian musician who's trying to make sense of what this all means for him and his livelihood. That's coming up on the program. And folks here in Manitoba will know who Skylar Park is, Olympic medalist, Olympian. She's going to be in studio to talk more about the RBC Training Ground. It's a national Olympic talent search. So if you're between the ages of 14 and 25, and if you've wondered if you have what it takes to be an Olympian, we're going to talk about that. And Skylar's going to be in studio, which I'm super excited about.
Yeah, that is so cool. And it's a great program. A lot of Olympians have been produced through that. Yeah.
So stay tuned. That's coming up. I think it's going to be on the show today. I can't remember what time, though, but stay tuned because it's going to be a lot of fun.
Thank you so much, Faith.
Thank you.
Faith Fundal, host of Up to Speed. Tune in to 3 to 6 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. That brings us to the end here of Radio Noon. Thank you so much for joining us today and spending part of your lunch hour with us. I want to thank the amazing folks on the show today. Our tech is Marshall Hodgins, our director, Sierra Sanders, our producer, Wendy Parker, associate producer, Carmen Ponto, YouTube live stream, Travis Peterson. I'm Marjorie Dowhouse. Enjoy the rest of your day. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Coming up next here on CBC Radio 1, The Next Chapter. Have a good one.